No, I love you too. No, 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 no. I love you too. No, I'm just piloting ever forward. No, 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 no. You hang up first. No, we've been on the phone like for 55 minutes and 10 seconds. I really got to get back. No, I got the third mate up here. He's fine. Can you hang on a second? I'm on the phone. Sorry about that. Yeah. No, you hang up first. Whoa! The only thing better than being master of Ever Forward is sitting down for dinner on Ever Forward. Whoa! Oh.
On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the U.S. Coast Guard has released its findings on the grounding of the motor vessel Ever Forward. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano, and an extremely bad actor, I think we can all agree on. So, today we're going to talk about the grounding of Ever Forward, which took place back in March 13th of 2022. 9 months later, the U.S. Coast Guard has released their report, and the findings don't look too good for the pilot and shipmaster. But we're going to break down the entire findings here. We're going to summarize them first, and then we'll go into detail and discuss what exactly is in the report and what transpired that day. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a second, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this. This comes from a story by our buddy Mike Schuller over on G Captain, who did a great job of basically summarizing the full event. Basically, the Coast Guard investigators found that the embarked maritime state pilot was relying solely on his portable pilot unit to navigate the vessel as it departed Seagirt Marine Terminal in Baltimore en route to Norfolk with 4,964 containers on board. During the course of the outbound transit, investigators discovered that the pilot made a series of 5 phone calls amounting to over 60 minutes. He also sent 2 text messages and began drafting an email immediately before the grounding occurred regarding issues he experienced with line handlers back at the terminal. A few minutes before the grounding took place, the pilot had also exited the active navigation of his PPU to view a previous transit. The Hong Kong flag ship grounded a little after 8:18 p.m. local time on March 30th, 2022, outside the Craighill Channel east of lighted buoy 16 after failing to turn at the charted waypoint while traveling at a speed of approximately 13 knots. Ever Forward's master was not on the bridge at the time of the grounding, as he had departed more than a half hour before to get dinner. On the bridge at the time was the 3rd officer, deck cadet, and an able-bodied seaman. The Ever Forward was eventually refloated with the help of 2 anchor barges, 5 large tugboats, and a full moon on April 17th, following dredging of more than 200,000 cubic yards of material from and around the vessel and the removal of 505 containers. The findings listed by the Coast Guard are really interesting. So the Coast Guard is recommending that marine operators develop and implement effective policies outlining when the use of cell phones and other portable electronic devices is appropriate or prohibited, and that vessel owners and operators ensure and promote crew awareness and policies regarding the duties and obligations of officers on watch for the safety of the ship, even when a pilot is embarked. All right. That's a lot to go over, but I wanted to give you that summary first before we jump into this. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Coast Guard report. We're also going to look at a video done by John Scott Ralston. He did this video back at the time that Ever Forward grounded. I've used it in a couple of videos. He's been nice enough to let me use it. I will have the link over to his Twitter page, which I strongly recommend you go follow. He's a great follow. So let's go ahead and investigate this with a little bit more detail. All right, so let's look at some of the data that's included in the Coast Guard report, and in particularly facts that are pertinent to this case. So first off, Ever Forward. Ever Forward was a fairly brand new ship. Came out just in September of 2020. It was registered in Hong Kong, classified by Lloyd's Shipping, so very reputable. For that, 117,000 gross tons. We're looking at a ship over 1,000 feet long, 1,095 feet. Almost 160 feet wide, 42.5-foot draft, and basically operated and owned by Evergreen Marine. This is a Taiwanese-based company, one of the largest container companies in the world, and for some strange reason has a problem every March with vessels grounding somewhere. It was Ever Forward outside of Baltimore, and it was Ever Given outside of the Suez in 2021. So the pilot was using what's called a portable pilot unit. Now, I'm not sure what type he was using, so I just pulled this up. This is a fairly typical type one you would see. It's comparable to a small laptop or an iPad. And what you use is it provides all the navigation data, all the charts, everything you need. It's basically an e-charter. And this provides a separate system from what the ship is using. And pilots like to have this as a backup. They have their charts in it. They'll have notes and other issues they need for going in and out of the channel. The unit plugs in to this. This is the pilot's plug. This is located on the forward bulkhead looking out the main windows on the bridge. So the pilot plugs into this. This allows them to tap into the GPS antennas and all the inputs that they need for updating their unit. So you would have the portable pilot unit, which the pilot is looking at, the third officer who's up on the bridge at this time. We're going to go talk about that in a second. So the navigation officers on the bridge would have their e-charts. These are electronic charts. And in the case of this ship, you have a deck cadet who's actually using paper charts. So you actually have 3 sets of navigation going on here at the same time. A lot of redundancy on EverForward. So this is the layout of the bridge, and you're looking, the top of the screen there is looking forward. The left side is the port side, the right side is the starboard side, the bottom is aft. In the center, you have the main navigation console right here, and the third officer would be here. This is where radars would be, your electronic charting system. Everything would be on these kind of 3 consoles right here. Just behind this would be the helmsman. This is where the able-bodied seaman was standing. They're steering the vessel by hand, so they're manually steering at this time. The pilot is up forward here of the navigation consoles. He has got his portable pilot unit plug right here. And so he's looking out these front main windows. And then there is a deck cadet. This is a officer in training that's on board. He or she would be using the paper charts and also navigating right here. So you get a total of 4 people on the bridge when the incident happens. We're going to talk about how we got to that in a second, because that's an interesting story too. So I'm going to use John Scott Railston's video here. Again, it's a great video. I've got the audio turned off here. A couple of things to note. The times he's using on here are Greenwich Mean Times or Universal Standard Times. So they're 4 hours ahead of local Baltimore time. Baltimore is on Eastern Seaboard. So there's going to be a little bit of a time issue. When you see that, just subtract 4. It's also in 24-hour time. So you add 12 to, or you subtract 12 to it to get the PM hour. So again, one of the big issues is the pilot obviously had an issue with either a previous docking or this docking. It's a little confusing in the report what they're saying. Now, the pilot himself is one with a lot of experience. He became an apprentice pilot back in 2007 with the Maryland State Pilots. He's been a senior pilot for 10 years. So definitely a pilot with a lot of experience here. This is not anyone new. And remember, the job of a pilot is to assist the ship's crew in the navigation in local waters. This is the power he's given. So this is a Maryland pilot who's certified to operate in Maryland waters down the Chesapeake Bay all the way to the exit of Chesapeake Bay, even though it's technically in Virginia waters. They have an agreement between them. And so the pilot provides advice. The pilot does not relieve the master and the ship's crew of safe navigation. That's really important to remember. However, there are times when this can be confusing, and I think this is one of those classic instances we see this happen. So the pilot's on board. He would have boarded the vessel, and it's a he. I know it's a he. Boarded the vessel before the vessel threw off lines. It begins to throw off lines. It's assisted by tugs, and it starts coming off the Seagrit Marine Terminal. And you see that right here. So around 2150, and again, we're using time here from GMT time, so you have to change that around a bit. They start coming off. Again, you're looking at roughly around 1800 hours, so that's about 6 p.m. Now, as soon as the vessel comes off, we start seeing issues here. So this is from the report. At 1818, and in the vicinity of the Seagrit Marine Terminal, Pilot 1, this is who they're calling the pilot who's on board, answered an inbound phone call that lasted approximately 28 seconds. So somebody called him, he answered it and said, I can't talk right now, and got off the phone. Perfectly what you should do. Probably shouldn't even have answered it, but he went ahead and did that. So the vessel is off the berth and it gets into the channel. You see here, 2300 hours. This would be roughly 1900 hours, 7 o'clock local time. The ship is now in the channel and heading out. Not a huge channel to come out, but now it's coming in with this near the vicinity of Sparrows Point. And in the report, at 1903 hours and just prior to passing Sparrows Point, Pilot 1 placed a personal call. He placed it. He picked up his phone and called someone. And this call lasted approximately 55 minutes and 10 seconds. Okay, hang on a second. This ship is off the dock at about 6 o'clock local time, and it's going to ground around 8 o'clock. So nearly half the time that he is underway, he is on a phone call, a personal phone call. I know he's talking to his girlfriend because I've already talked to people about this. I knew this for a long time. I've been just waiting for this report to come out. So he is on a phone call with his girlfriend. And granted, nothing happens during this period of time, unlike the video at the beginning, but it is a distraction from his ultimate responsibilities. Is it the cause for the grounding? No, it's not the cause for the grounding, but as you'll see, there are other issues at play here. So while this goes on, and while he's on the phone call for approximately 27 minutes into his phone call, the master departs the bridge to have dinner at the galley. Okay, hold the phone here for a second. So number one, it's 7:30 at night, and the master is walking off the bridge and leaving the control of the ship, the con, in the hands of the pilot. Now, it's not clear in the report what exactly happens here. At this time of night, the officer on watch should be the second mate. Now, understand there are 4 navigation officers on a ship. There's the captain, who does not stand a watch, but the captain would be up on the bridge during tough navigation, docking, undocking, piloting. The chief mate, who's also the first officer, known always as the mate. The second mate is the navigator, and the third mate is the junior watchstander on this crew. They split up. Those 3 will split up. They do 4 hours on, 8 hours off, 24 hours a day. So on this period of time here, right around 1700 hours, 1730 hours when the master's leaving, this should be the second mate. The second mate usually has the dawn and the dusk watch. That's the way it works. And the second mate would have the con. Now, if the master was hungry, typically what you do on most ships is bring food up to the bridge. The steward brings a plate up, feeds the pilot, feeds the master, and they eat dinner together, standing up, looking out, making sure there's safe navigation. Masters typically don't leave the bridge in the hands of a pilot. And if they did for any reason, they would have one of their senior officers up on the bridge. The chief mate typically would be up there. But again, we don't see that in this case. At least it's not articulated here in this video. So the master leaves. So at 1950 hours, the third officer and the deck cadet arrive on the bridge to complete a scheduled watch relief. And this is done by 1957. Now, understand, the third mate is the junior officer, the least experienced officer in the entire crew. Now, in this case, this third officer has been a third officer for 2 years and had actually been on board Everforward for 6.5 months. And so this third officer has experience. He's actually, or he or she, we don't know, has been in and out of Baltimore at least a few times. But now the bridge is in the hand of the most junior deck officer. The pilot has a con. Now, there's a question here, too, is if the master gave con to the pilot, would the second mate turn the con over to the third officer, or would the pilot remain with control of the vessel? And typically, only someone senior to another officer can relieve themselves of the con. Now, the third mate could. The third mate can assume the con of the vessel. However, would a third mate do that from a pilot who has navigated out of a harbor dozens, if not hundreds of times? And that's very unlikely. So at 1958, the pilot ends his marathon phone call he's been on with his personal connection there. So you finally get that phone call over. And now the pilot should be not as distracted as he heads toward the most challenging part of this navigation, which is going to be heading down the Craighill Channel. Now at 2000 hours, the pilot does a couple of things. He orders full speed ahead. Full ahead at here is going to be about 13 knots. The bridge team is going to comply with that. And at the same time, he places a phone call on the phone for about 4 minutes. So what we see is this vessel start entering the Craighill Channel, and the speeds start coming up. And that speed's going to be continually increasing until it's about 13 knots. Now, he placed that call at 2000 hours, 2007. He sends a text message to another member of the Association of Maryland Pilots relating to line handlers on the previous voyage. 2008, pilot places another call that went unanswered. So in a period of 8 minutes there, he's ordered full ahead. He's placed a phone call and been talking for half the time. He sent a text message, and then he placed another call. And then at 2010, EverForward enters the Craighill angle, and Pilot 1 orders a heading of 161 degrees. And this is the angle they're going to be heading in as they head to the final turn. Now understand, it's a clear night. These buoys are well lit. Red buoy on your left, green buoys on your right. And you're going to come to a point where you're going to need to make a turn due south, 180 degrees. It's like the yellow brick road. It is a long path of buoys that take you to the Key Bridge. But it's at this point that the pilot begins playing around on his PPU, on his portable piloting unit. And he's looking back at a previous voyage. At 2014 hours, the pilot activates a screen on there where he looks at a screenshot, and that's going to freeze up his PPU. He's no longer navigating with that unit. Instead, what comes up on that screen is the previous voyage. And then at 2015, the pilot sends another text message with the image that he had saved to a member of the Association of Maryland Pilots. A minute after that, at 2016, he starts drafting an email. Now, he's got a major course change coming up here. And instead, what he is doing is screenshotting, he's texting, and he is sending an email at this point. And as he proceeds, the ship is continuing down its path, and it's heading into the angle where it needs to make this course change and speed. Now, at 2017, EverForward crossed the predetermined waypoint position to initiate a turn to approximately 180 degrees. Now, a few minutes ago, the pilot gave the order to turn to 161 degrees. He's ordered full speed ahead. They're up at 13 knots. You see here, they're at about 12.6 knots. And they're missing this point. And what we see here is actions by the third officer is what we wanted to see. So at about 2017, the third officer announces on the bridge that the vessel's heading 161, course 161, speed 13 knots. The pilot verbally acknowledges that order. He says exactly what the third officer said. So he knew what his course, what his speed was. But according to the third officer, the pilot was looking at his phone and texting at that moment. At that same moment, pilot observed that the bridge team seemed to be chattering more and more around the bridge console. This comes from the report. At the same time, the third officer notified the pilot that the PPU, the portable pilot unit, did not match the electronic chart display and information system, the EKIT system. This is the electronic charting system. And the reason it doesn't match is because the PPU is frozen in a screen grab of a previous voyage. It is not actively tracking the voyage. We know that because when the Coast Guard came in and downloaded the data, there's a 5-minute gap from 2014 to 2019. That's while this image was up. At 2018, the pilot ordered a 15-degree starboard rudder, then ordered hard starboard 20 seconds later. But at that point, it's too late. The vessel has careened out of the channel and moved into shallow water. That's at 2018. So this entire voyage does not take more than 2 hours for it to transpire. And remember, back at 618, he got his first phone call, and now this is 2018, 818. He is now aground. I got to say here, the situation is pretty critical. They have now careened out of the channel. They have run aground, and the pilot has lost what we call situational awareness. He was so distracted by texting, by emails, by his phone, by looking at a previous voyage on his PPU, that he has lost the situational awareness of what's happening around him. Now, you're going to ask yourself, wait a minute, the third officer could have grabbed this and ordered the helm order. Yes, he or she could have, but would they have done it? I have to say, even a third officer with 2 years of experience, being on that vessel for 6.5 months, would be very leery of second guessing a pilot who's got years and hundreds of voyages under their belt and know the waters they're in. Yes, this third officer has been in and out of Baltimore, but he's also, or he or she's been out of Norfolk and Savannah and New York and other ports. And that doesn't exactly mean you know the inside and outside of that port like a pilot does. And that's an important issue right there. The pilot had the control. He had responsibility. Now, let's not forget who's missing from this entire equation, which is the ship's master, who is down below eating, I hope, a delicious meal. So this is from the report directly, and I'll have this up here for you to take a look at. So at 2019, the pilot's PPU resumed recording. He obviously got the screen grab off, and it's very clear what had happened at that point. Also at 2019, the third officer summoned the master to the bridge. So he makes that phone call to the master report to the bridge. Goes on here, the pilot ordered stop engine and then followed by a full astern bell. So he doesn't think that they are too far stuck, yet he had just careened out of that channel at 13 knots. And let me be clear, this ship is stuck. I mean, he rammed this vessel into the mud. 2021, the pilot inquired the vessel's speed and was notified by the bridge team the speed was 0.4 knots, so it's just shifting in the mud. There's not a lot going on here. The pilot indicated to the bridge that he did not believe the vessel was aground. Man, is he wrong about that. And ordered the bridge team to prepare the bow thrusters. Now, bow thrusters only work at slow speed. You can't use bow thrusters at anything more than 3 knots. So typically they would be offline, not going to be used. 2023, 5 minutes after the grounding, the master returns to the bridge. The third officer calls the second officer up to the bridge to download the VDR information. This is the vessel data recorder. This records everything from conversations on the bridge to all the electronic data from the charts, from the GPS, everything is in there. 2024, the pilot gave the command to engage the bow thrusters. Next minute, 2025, the master gave orders to stop engines and conduct a safety check in accordance with the vessel's the safety management system. So they're going to start taking soundings. They're going to make sure that they haven't punctured the hull. They're not basically spilling oil into the water, and they're not causing an environmental damage. At 2031, the master began to make notifications of the grounding. So who do you call first? Well, not the Coast Guard. He calls his home office in Taipei, Taiwan, of Evergreen Marine, and then the local EverForward representative. At 2031, the pilot orders full astern. The bridge team acknowledged, but again, it doesn't seem to be doing anything. The pilot explained to the master that it was in his opinion that the crew should attempt astern propulsion again. Yeah, because he wants to get this thing off, because he does not want this to be a major event, which it turns into. Again, it's aground for over a month. At 2040, the pilot's PPU stop recording. They include this great image here, which is a side scan sonar of the chart and the vessel. This is the channel, the deep blue water right here. This is the channel. Green, yellow, and red are shoal waters. Going as more red you get, the more you're a shoal. And you can see how EverForward literally plowed a channel into the shallow water here until the bow got basically pushed up out of the water and stuck. I mean, this vessel was stuck. If you're going to ground it, he grounded it really well. At 2050, the master verified with the chief mate that the seabed was mud and shells. That's really important, that they didn't go into rocks, which would have meant a potential hull puncture. 2052, the pilot ordered full stern with starboard bow thruster, and the bridge team complied. 2054, they stopped those engines in the bow thruster. At 2101, the pilot notifies Sector Maryland, National Capital Region, that the EverForward was grounded via cell phone. Doesn't call on VHF, not on the audible radio where everybody can hear it, but he calls on his cell phone. At 2102, when speaking with Sector Maryland National Capital Region, the pilot stated that the vessel's turn south to the lower Craighill Channel was executed late and that he could not say any more until his statement had been reviewed by an attorney. The pilot also indicated that there was no equipment malfunctions, navigational issues, and there was no pollution or injuries. Okay, first off, can I be clear? Why was that not released sooner? It's 9 months since this happened. All the discussion has been either one of two things: mechanical failure or human negligence or human failure. And very clearly, this could have been said it's not mechanical. This should have been said right from the very beginning. Why this information is not released, who knows? But it's been 9 months. And let me be clear. I told people today, hey, the Coast Guard report is out. It's been 9 months. And their reply from people in the industry is like, wow, that's fast. Gives you an idea how long these things take. 2108, the pilot gives the order to lower the anchor. And 2143, EverForward engineers confirmed the grounding had not resulted in any pollution. 2240, another Maryland State pilot arrives to relieve the first pilot. Now, at this point, there's an interesting thing that happens. The pilot departs the vessel at 2250, 10 minutes later, to return to the Association of Maryland Pilots to complete drug and alcohol testing. Why the Coast Guard allowed him to leave, or did he leave without Coast Guard permission? I don't know. It's not articulated here. I would think the Coast Guard would execute all the drug and alcohol testing of not just the pilot, but the crew. But suffice it to say that there's a negative result in this. No one tests positive at all. So everyone is clear here. So this chain of events here is really, I gotta say, amazing in the way they unfold. The fact that the master's not on the bridge, the fact that the pilot's distracted. I drive down the road texting and, doing things on the phone. That's reckless. That's reckless endangerment. That's what you're doing here. You are not in command of the vessel if your attention is so distracted, especially in a narrow channel where there are course changes coming up. Let's go to the findings of the Coast Guard here. So first is the findings of concern. And the findings of concern will discuss specifically what the Coast Guard has. And this goes through a series of endorsements. This is the final endorsement from the Office of the Commandant here. So first, it is recommended that vessel owners and marine operators develop and implement effective policies outlining when the use of cell phones and other portable electronic devices is appropriate or prohibited. I was just at an event in Florida where I had dinner with the president of a pilot association. I won't say which entity, but that pilot association handles a port similar to Baltimore in scope and scale. And I asked specifically about what is their cell phone policy. And he said, while the pilots do carry their cell phones with them, they're not allowed to use them unless it is in the safe navigation of the vessel. For example, calling another pilot in case they couldn't get communication. But they do not allow them to call whoever they want at any time they want. It goes on here. Sector Maryland National Capital Region drafted a finding of concern which serves as an update to a marine safety advisory. And the action here is that the Coast Guard Commandant concurs with the recommendation that you'll see here in a minute. The other finding of concern is it recommended vessel owners and operators ensure and promote crew awareness of policies regarding the duty and obligation of officers on watch for the safety of the ship, even when a pilot is embarked. So the third mate was in a position where he or she could have countermanded the orders of the pilot and put the ship into the channel and raise concern. But what's really interesting here is that the mate did not raise concern at all. The mate did give the helm order and speed to the pilot, but the pilot never took his head out from his text. And so there is a concern here that the mate did or was negligent in the operation and safety of the vessel. Should the mate have assumed command from the pilot? That's a tough one because the pilot has a lot of responsibility and a lot of experience in the handling of the ships in these channels. He knows these waters. That's what he's on board for. There's also a series of administrative recommendations here. It's recommended that the officer in charge of the marine inspection initiate enforcement action for negligent operation of a commercial ship. Under 46 U.S. Code provides that a person operating a vessel in a negligent manner or interfering with the safe operation of a vessel so as to endanger the life, limb, or property of a person is liable to the U.S. government for a civil penalty. In order to show a violation occurred under this site, there must be evidence to show that the charged party, number one, operated a vessel, number two, in a negligent manner, and in doing so, number three, endangered the life, limb, or property of a person. Yeah, no one's life was endangered, but you did have 4,000 something containers that were late for delivery. People were waiting on that. Businesses were waiting on that. I know one person was waiting to get their home furnishings because of this vessel. This is negligence. And so what we're seeing here is that they're going to go after, obviously, the pilot here, but I'm also interested about the master here. Are they going to go after the master? The problem with the master is it's a foreign master. It's not a U.S. master. So are they going to be able to do it? The other recommendations, number one, is to close the investigation. And number three, recommended that a report of the investigation be released to the public. This report, well, this endorsement came out on December 2nd. So the final thing here, what does this mean in the big term? What does it mean in the long term? I mean, first off, I got to say, 9 months to me is a long time for a report where the person responsible for it sat there and gave you the answer. He made his turn late. So I'm not sure why we didn't talk about this initially. If we knew this was an issue with cell phone use, why didn't a instantaneous notice of mariner go out to the Coast Guard, to the ships operating about use of cell phones in navigating in and out of ports? Why are we waiting 9 months for this? Understand, we've had a series of mishaps in U.S. ports that could have conceivably shut down ports for a long period of time. Understand, Everforward, had it not been going at 13 knots, had it been navigating just a bit differently, it could have blocked the channel to Baltimore for a month. That would have been horrendous for the port of Baltimore. Golden Ray coming out of Brunswick, Georgia, because the fact the crew did not do the stability calculations accurately. The pilot taking the vessel out turned right and the vessel rolled over. Fortunately, that pilot was able to maneuver the vessel out of the channel and prevent the port of Brunswick, Georgia from closing. But we had that instance, the Mare Surabaya coming into Savannah because of a blown fuse in an engine order telegraph. When the order went to the helmsman to turn the rudder, she kept turning the rudder because the rudder angle didn't seem to be turning, and went from, instead of giving a small rudder angle order, basically went full over and slid the vessel out of the channel and blocked the channel. But fortunately, the ship was moved very quickly. These are instances with large vessels that can close ports and impact America's economy. And what are we doing about this? The fact that I hear from people in the industry that 9 months is a quick amount of time, I got to say it's not. It's a really long period of time. We're putting ships at risk and crews in jeopardy when we don't immediately enforce this. Even though the NTSB is no fast entity when coming out with reports, I got to say on the aviation side, when accidents happen, just the most recent aviation accident involving a P-63 fighter and a B-17, you're already hearing preliminary results and reports coming in. They're issuing things. The Coast Guard's been silent for 9 months. I don't even know if the NTSB is doing an investigation into this. So, I mean, this is an element we have to get more proactive in monitoring ships, especially these larger vessels that are coming into U.S. ports, because there is a very small margin for error. When everything goes great, it's fantastic. But it's that 1% error that could conceivably shut down major ports. This is the port of Baltimore. We've seen it with Brunswick. We've seen it with Savannah. What happens if it's a major port? LA, Long Beach. Remember Ever Given? Only took one vessel to shut 12% of the world trade for 6 days. You can't wait for this to happen and then fix this. You've got to start being more proactive about this. So I hope you enjoyed today's video and our movie portrayal. Again, this is the most elaborate video we've done at what's going on with shipping. We're raising the bar here. And with that, that means, how about some support? By support, what can you do? Well, number one, subscribe and like. Be sure you like this channel and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page by either hitting that super thanks button below and contributing directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon at the end of the video, become a patron of the page. You can support the channel through monthly and yearly subscriptions. This is Sal, signing off.